Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander.
Chris, great to have you on the show.
Dan, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So we're same time zone. You're up Portland, Maine. I'm here in New York, where it's a beautiful, balmy 70 degrees and sunny. Recording this on June 2nd, as if we're like a CNN-like podcast where the current events are super important.
Yeah, scrolling across the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. So my first question is, you've got an interesting background, and I think you're approaching a lot of these challenges we have in the agency space from an interesting perspective. So can you talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So Chris DuBois, in case anyone needed to understand how to pronounce the French last name. I am an agency coach. I focus on positioning and go-to-market strategy. I am the founder of the Dynamic Agency OS, which is a positioning system. And I kind of came about this to abbreviate the long version. Came out of college, was in the Army, because that's what you do with an English degree. So you go be an infantry officer. Traveled around for a bit, and then when we were finally getting out, apparently a lot of those infantry qualities don't translate as much to the business world. And so finding a job was a little harder. But I started working at an agency, and just as a marketer, did that for about 9 months, then became their head of operations, did that for a couple of years, became CEO. And then I stepped down and started coaching agencies. And through the coaching, I've realized how poorly most agencies are positioned. And so I've continuously just refined my systems, I guess, to help agencies differentiate. And, in a world where there's service saturation because it's never been easier to start an agency, more agencies can actually stand out and show off their expertise.
Yeah, that's interesting. But there's that old cliche, like we teach what we most need to learn sort of thing. And I think I keep running into that with our business and getting clarity around it and so on. We've gone through lots of twists and turns from done for you model to training and coaching. And now we're sort of adapting a hybrid model as I record this, where we're doing some aspects of it, all in the aim of finding the right solution, and what's interesting is that we've always had like one core ICP, which are boutique agencies, and you could even narrow that down more if you wanted to. But I think what we see is a lot of our clients are trying to do what is already very hard, especially even for us, so it's still a continuous battle, like getting more clarity on solving this problem. But then they're trying to do it across like 10 industries, or maybe 5 industries or something like that.
Right.
So I'd love it if you could dig a little more into the clarity building aspect, and what you've seen work and how you've seen people like feel a sense of progress.
Sure.
In that area.
So this is actually probably in line with what you were just saying with having too many industries, where that was my initial finding was, hey, if we're trying to be everything to everyone, right, everyone knows, all right, it's not going to work. But when I started to look at this more, it's like, okay, well, we need one audience, or we need to know who we're targeting. We also need to identify what problem can we solve for them, and then what service do we offer. And as I was figuring that stuff out, it was like, well, most agencies have 10 different industries that they work with. They're also trying to solve probably 4 or 5 different problems, and they're offering 10, 20 different solutions, or services, really, not solutions. But when you start doing the math and you multiply all of those together, right, we get 10 audiences by 5 problems, we're up to 50, and then say another 10, that's 500 different variables within this business that we have to figure out. And so when you bring on a new team member and they're struggling to onboard and get all that set, it's probably because you have too much you're trying to do. When you have a client or a prospect who says, hey, tell me more about yourself, and it takes you 10 minutes of this word salad to explain what you actually do and what you are best at, even. It's just, these are all indicative of having too much complexity within your business. And it really stems from those 3 things versus having one audience, one problem, one solution. Now we have one thing that we are very good at, which translates to a lot of reps. And the more reps we can get at one thing means we get really good at pattern matching. We get really good at that. And that's what creates that clarity. Like we can look at something and see all of the details. We know exactly what next step to do because that's all we do.
Right. That makes sense. I think that what I've felt, so some of this might be projecting, and then, but we do see this with clients a lot, is there's this kind of reverse Dunning-Kruger effect. Do you have the Dunning-Kruger effect? Are you familiar with that?
Hit me again.
it's the less we know about something, the more confident we are about it,
Mhm.
right? So, and then the reverse is that the more I learn, the less I know, right? So it's like the more you know about a particular industry, the more problems you see with it, the more you see, well, this industry is, or this problem is hard to solve. You see all the warts, like you see all the issues. Where a lot of the times what we see is that the agency is like, hey, we just had this great client over here. We have one happy client in banking, and we should pivot to this for these reasons. But really, the agency just hasn't gotten far enough into it to see all the hard problems they're going to have to solve to focus on that. Um, so how do you, assuming that makes sense, how do you suggest balancing that? Like for that agency that has that grab bag of industries, how do you decide on the one problem you want to solve or the one area you want to focus on?
Yeah, it's really hard to get. It's like an emotional event, I think, for most agencies to work through this stuff. But I have one example of a client who, when I started working with them, they were really just starting out in the agency kind of journey, and in the process, I happen to have a friend who was running marketing for a tech company, and he's like, "Hey, you know someone who can help me with SEO services?" I'm like, this client happens to do SEO services. However, he's focused on local SEO. And so, like, you know what? We can still make this work. Like, go ahead, do it. Huge contract that's still paying out like 30 plus K a month for an agency that's just starting. Like, that's awesome, right? We did the math, and he's already winning for SEO in his city, right? So he's dominating that area, getting clients continuously, like more sales calls. And even right now with the market kind of shifting with everything, like he's set. But there's this taste for like large contracts that local businesses can't fulfill. And it's like all the advice from other financial experts, from other people keep saying, well, why don't you go for more tech companies and be able to, leverage those? Like your life's going to be easier, fewer clients, bigger payouts. But what they don't seem to realize is that that's where everyone's trying to market. Like if you already own your industry or this market within a local SEO, right? Like this specific city, we did the math. He can become a $6 million agency if he only gets 3% of the total addressable market, and that's assuming only 5% are currently searching for assistance, right? Very conservative numbers. But that little, like, I don't know if it's a shiny object or just like this dream of like, oh, but those are big contracts and I can go over there and get those. It's like, yeah, but you're entering a pool where you got to fight with agencies who've been doing this for like decades and have reputation engines that are cycling, where they can do things you can't do in order to win those deals. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I think if I think about like some pivots we've made as a company that I think were really good, and then others that I think I probably would do over again, with the ones that were usually wrong, it's because I encountered a boss in the video game, and then I said, let's just go play a different video game, as opposed to like, let's try to beat this boss.
Yeah.
I'm trying to bring this to a question, but I guess like, how does that resonate with you, and have you run into that issue?
Yeah, I think it's the obstacle is the way kind of concept, right? So anyone can go read Ryan Holiday. But yeah, I think as soon as it starts getting hard somewhere, it's real easy to be like, well, we can go try this. But once you get, 10 levels deeper and then you hit that next boss, you're like, well, no, this one's a little challenging too. Maybe I shift here. And so,
Right. And where I think agencies have it worse is that you really can switch gears more easily, right? If you're like a funded tech startup and you've gotten all this funding because you're going to solve X problem for Y person, yeah, you can pivot, but it's a bigger decision, and
right.
it's a bigger decision versus like, yeah, I got this client over here. Let's just go down that path.
Definitely.
Yeah. So let's keep going with this. We talked a lot about clarity and a lot about specialization. Is there an 80/20 that you're usually starting with new agencies that are in the weeds with these problems or others? Like how are you typically starting with people when you're working with them?
So from a positioning standpoint, I need them to get clarity on their audience, but a lot of times it comes down to like, what problem do you solve better than anyone else? And because most agencies will say, hey, we do SEO, we do websites, we do this, but like those are services and stuff. Like, it's great, but what problem do you actually solve with that? Because people care about the outcome that they're going to achieve. And so when we can get really clear on that problem, we can then name it, frame it, and start marketing with that problem. You can start putting it out in front of people. You just start talking about it. All your presentations include it, right? You can go on a podcast and talk about it. And the more you talk about that problem with clarity, the more people think you have the solution, because you know this problem with such a level of like depth that it resonates with them. And so, yeah, a lot of times we just go there.
Yeah, I think that's really apt. When I was creating content years ago, it seemed like this uphill battle, because I always thought like I need to give people the solution. I need to tell them how to solve this particular problem with everything that I create. So the content was too long, and it also just took too long to create. When over time, like really, like when you're creating these things at the top of the funnel, so much of it is about like if you can identify the problem, people automatically assume you can solve it. But it takes understanding a market really well to be able to like isolate that problem, and it's like continuous to update that sort of thing.
Right.
So we talked about that, and I think one thing that a lot of clients in our program struggle with is like really the how of specializing and positioning, and like how long it should take and what comes first. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, let's say you identify that problem and they identify their market. Are your clients blowing up their websites tomorrow and reinventing them? Like what's the first step up the mountain?
Yeah, some of them are. It really comes down to how fast they want to move. And like your level of risk tolerance, risk assumption, I guess, is really going to dictate all this. But I think you can pretty comfortably within 90 days, which is actually, I'm switching my coaching to be a tighter curriculum so that we just do it in 90 days. You get clarity on your audience, figure out all the details, where are they going, who are they already talking to, these types of things. Figure out the problem, and then you do your solution design so you can create a compelling offer. And then with that compelling offer and everything else you know about the market, update your website, update all these assets, right? Create your nurturing sequences, those types of things. And like you should pretty comfortably be able to do that within 90 days, especially now with like AI tools for research and stuff like that. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting with AI, because it's like what I keep coming across is like the line between deciding what to do and actually doing it is getting very thin, and there's like becoming less of a disconnect between the two. Does that make sense? And are you seeing that as well?
I don't know. You have an example?
Well, there's this whole idea of like, we're going to figure out like the sort of strategy based agency where it's like, we're going to figure out what you should go do, and then we'll go and do it for you. When the reality is like so much of that stuff can be done by AI now. And then also if you ask the right questions, you could actually figure out what you should do if it had the right inputs. So that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I think not seeing it yet because you have to be so clear in your prompting and everything to like get the exact results you want. And so like if I just go to AI and say, hey, I want a strategy on X, Y, and Z, like it's not going to do well. But like I've actually I put this up in Dynamic Agency community today, so you can go check this out right after. I've been doing a bunch of research on like Neil Patel, because he's got multiple agencies. He's successful with all of them. So I'm like, okay, well, what's he doing in his marketing that's working? And so I started all of his podcasts, videos, blogs, like just consuming it all. I had my list of notes, and then I fed that into ChatGPT with like the deep research function and said, fill in the blanks, like help me flesh this out. From that, I can now create a prompt that says, hey, here's a document that I need you to reference for how Neil Patel does all of this. I would like you to create a strategy given like these inputs. What would you have? And so now we're at least giving it more information to be able to flesh some of these details out. I don't know that one specifically will do anything. Neil Patel's got some money to throw behind all of his marketing. But
yeah. But even just, it's funny, I actually have the tab just to the left of Riverside. So I did medicine. Awesome. That's fantastic. So I guess not to put you on the spot, but what did you learn? What were like a few bullet points, if you remember any from that deep dive?
Actually, so yeah, he does doing things like content upgrades, which is something I'm going to start doing. Like if you write a blog post, you can create a simple asset now that just helps with one of the problems that you brought up in that blog post. And a lot of people think like a lead magnet has to be something incredibly complex and like it's going to, right, we're doing these calculators and these ebooks and guides and all that, like, or it could just be like a prompt that based off what you did in your article could help someone get further along with that problem. But they got to sign up for your email list to do it. Boom. We just added someone to our newsletter. We can start actually nurturing them just because we gave them this little helpful thing. And so that's one thing I'm going to do. He's looked at purchasing, or I mean, he hasn't looked at it, he's done it. He's purchased software where you go like, was it like micro acquire little companies, right? Purchase those and then use that as a free tool in order to market your agency. So like if you're doing SEO, you can be, what's the Ask the Public, I think is one of his software. Like he can give that away for free, knowing that anyone who does sign up for like added features and everything will then be marketed by like Neil Patel Digital or whatever company. But now what's interesting is we have tools like Lovable, Cursor, all of these other things that you could just make a simple tool like that solves one little problem and use that as your lead gen source. And so you can follow kind of the same approach, but without needing the capital that he has, be able to deploy that same way.
Yeah, and then there's a whole other world of that with GPTs and creating those. So like as your agency's developing a perspective and presumably you're creating content on some level, that's basically a GPT. It's like perspective, that creation. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Tied to a lot of this decision making, i.e., where should we specialize? What do we focus on? You have the PRISM model, which I think is really useful. Can you talk about that? What is the PRISM model?
So I can't say most. It's like 30-something% of businesses fail because there's no market need. And that's like across the board, not just agencies. But can you imagine building a business, like doing all the hard work, the labor behind creating this business, only to find out that nobody wants what you're selling? To agencies' credit, like you brought up earlier, it is easy to shift. If we're an agency, we don't have all the software costs and everything else. But so I made the PRISM model, figure out like what is a deserving problem that we can base a business off. And so the PRISM stands for painful, recurring, impactful, solvable, marketable. And all of these are on like a spectrum, maybe a continuum. I don't know. But the idea is something could be really painful, but maybe it's only a little recurring, right? It happens once a year, but it's incredibly painful, like taxes. Right? We're miserable. We know we're going to pay someone to do it to make sure that it's done right so that we don't face the consequences, which if we get into the impact, right, the consequences of taxes really, really bad. We also know this is solvable because we can just do the taxes. We're not going to go change the U.S. tax code. And so how solvable this is a little different. I don't even know the Congress is good at changing tax codes. And then the marketability is like, can we find people who have this problem that we can actually market to? How easy is it to find them? How easy is it to talk about it? And so on the opposite side, we could have something that's not very painful, but happens every single day, right? Like not knowing where your contacts are. Okay, we can create a CRM. Like there's tons of them out there. It's going to impact every part of your business. It is a solvable problem. It's marketable to anyone who fits certain criteria. But you can work through all of these details to figure out like the higher it is on every scale. If you had something super painful and super recurring and it impacts every part of your business, right? And it's solvable and marketable. Like you have a problem that you can make $1 billion business on.
Yeah, and there's so many places to kind of dig into that model. Painful. I think that most people could figure out that. Like I could figure that with our market. For us, it's like, hey, pipeline's empty. We need more leads or whatever. Recurring, yeah, that's obviously recurring. Impactful, yes. Marketable, yes. I think the one that is interesting, where there's a lot of devil in the details, is the solvable and like what aspect or what microcosm of the problem that you solve are you going to focus on solving? So if I said, we're going to wave a magic wand and do away with your pipeline woes forever, that probably would be lying. It wouldn't happen. And also, even if it was true, nobody would believe me because it's such a big, hairy problem. Right. So our microcosmal problem is like, we're going to help you set up the right infrastructure and learn the system and run it and make it a lot easier than if you did it yourself, which is a smaller promise. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is there a way that you're helping, I guess, maybe just digging into the model in general? Are there areas of the model that you find harder or easier to identify?
Yeah. What's interesting about the solvable piece is that there's like a radar people have. So even if you could somehow solve all of their pipeline woes, right? And like you've done it multiple times, you put that up on your website, like people are going to say one of three things, either like, no, I don't believe it, like, wow, that's awesome, or bullshit. And even if it's true, if people say bullshit, you've just lost the trust factor. Like, and so it doesn't matter, even if you can do it. So you have to find smaller problems to be able to tackle that actually people can believe you have the solution for. But with that, it really comes down to like, is there a repeatable way that I can solve this? You can do a lot of like, especially in agency worlds, right? We can be bespoke. We can get super custom with every client, but we don't want to do that because it gets much harder to actually learn and create a system for getting, the same results over and over. And I had a first sergeant in the Army who used to say there are two ways to learn anything fast: blunt force trauma and repetition. And so obviously everyone prefers the repetition piece because then we can just keep figuring it out. But like that is another opportunity. Is like, yeah, you can go do custom and just get your face punched in every new client and figure that out. But it doesn't necessarily translate to figuring it out for all of the other problems, subsequent problems. And so, yeah, I would pick the smallest problem that is still something, the outcome of that problem is something appealing to your audience.
Yeah, I love that. Repetition or blunt force trauma. Those are the options. That's really memorable. Yeah, so kind of like digging into that a little bit more. I think one thing that you've talked about in the past that I think is a really good observation is that a lot of the times there's this encouragement to develop documentation and processes around stuff that just isn't good yet. And that wastes a lot of time, kind of like doing efficiently that which should not be done at all, sort of
Yep.
Peter Drucker approach. Can you talk about that a little bit and like how are agencies making that mistake?
A lot of agencies that I talk to, probably just a lot out there. Hopefully, I mean, there's going to be some of you listening that this will resonate with. The entire focus comes down to profitability, which is great. We need profit, right? That's what pays for our vacations. It gives us a reason to actually want to run the business and everything. So because of that, there's a lot of focus around the operational side of agency work, and which it makes sense because there's also a lot to do on the operation side. But I think because there's so much in the market about how you got to create the systems, you got to have the frameworks, you got to have everything. Everybody focuses in on that, and they miss the key point. It's that of like, yes, we can create this system to replicate the results, but if our results suck, then we are just replicating mediocrity, and your business will not grow that way. Like you're going to lose clients, you're going to hurt your reputation, you're going to run into all these trouble. And so this was actually what led me to realize, like, actually, we need to start with offers. And actually, before that, we should probably make sure that our teams have the skills and the competencies, are in the right positions to be able to even deliver these offers. Like the number of times I've seen, an SEO agency that doesn't have anyone who's like mastered SEO, right? Or has figured out those skills. Like, well, we've done web design, so we can just add SEO. It's like, no, you can't, because that's not great. Like ethically, that's wrong to take someone's money for that. And so, but it's the same thing when we're trying to optimize all these processes, and it's like, we just get a great result first. And like, so that you can actually replicate and do something with the replication. The multiplier effect, if you're multiplying by like 1, doesn't do anything for you.
Right. I think that's a really good point. I think one thing that is tough for a lot of agencies is like the owners are stuck in so many different things, and being able to take time to do these sort of skunkworks projects is hard. One issue that I've seen, and I've done this myself, is that when we're trying to figure out what works, we go into this like this bean counter mode, right? And we're like looking at spreadsheets and P&Ls and surveys or whatever it is. And I recently, I've been listening to that book by Dan Heath. It might be new. I think it's called Unstuck. You ever read that one?
No, someone brought it up on the podcast. So
Okay. I just found it by scanning Audible. But it draws from a lot of different places. But one thing that's interesting is like when you're trying to get unstuck, the thing to focus on is actually like what he calls sunny spots. So it's like a limited amount of data points. It might be, for us, we make a client hall of fame. So it's not like every client's going in there, but best retained, most happy, the stuff where just like lights you up when you think about this client. So it's like comparatively less data, but you're basically looking at these fewer things to figure out, okay, what do these things have in common? There's plenty of ways they're not like each other. Like what we figured out was like, there really isn't an agency vertical that we're better at than others, right? Because there's creatives and programmatic and all these different things. What it came down to is probably like a certain size and maturity of the agency was important. And then there's attitudinal things that are harder to like put into a spreadsheet.
Yep.
I guess like one thing that you have that's tied to this, I think, is the efficiency innovation spectrum. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So again, another continuum. I like these things. But the idea for most agencies, we have really two distinct types. You either got this like crazy creative agency, crazy in a good way, where we just want to design, like we got into this because we love this type of like creative work. We just want to do this. Versus the more efficient side, that's running like a factory. We got to figure all this out. We're going to follow every step of the process, and we're just going to play the volume game to be able to maximize everything. Every agency owner gets to decide where they want to be on this continuum, right? You can be somewhere in the middle. You can be off to whichever. It doesn't matter. It's what do you want as the owner, like with your team and everything. And so when you also look at all of those clients, right, and not just the data, but those like anecdotal pieces of this to say, these are the people that I want to work with. What type of service do they want and stuff? Does that match with what I want to do? Then you can just kind of pick that and go all in. So if you're, if you're on the creative side, your costs are generally going to be higher. It's going to take a little longer to get things done, but you're going to have way higher pricing that you can charge. On the innovation side, you can go cheaper, but your margins are going to be way better. And so it's a lot more efficient, right? Just figuring out where you sit on that spectrum continuum. Again, I never know which I should use. But
I like continuums too, because I think maybe this was like a Hormozy, observation or something, but it's sort of that like we put a lot of things into binaries that are really continuums, so it's like, do you have product market fit? I hate that as a binary. It's like, no, it's how much product market fit do you have, right?
Right.
I would say Kleenex has perfect product market fit because you say Kleenex when you mean a tissue, right? Versus everything else is on a continuum. Yeah.
Well, and what would be the goal of saying like, yes, we have it. Okay, what does that actually change in your business?
Right.
Right. Like nothing. You should be marketing the same way and like still doing the same things in order to keep building that up. And so, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and it's sort of like, oh, you have like as if you would know. Like a lot of times there's people will describe having product market fit with just simply having a period of success, right? So it's like, oh, I closed all these deals. It's like, well, yeah, you probably have some semblance of it then, but
hey, till the market changes, and then
yeah, exactly.
Those pants don't fit well.
Yeah, so what I'd love to do, we talked a lot about positioning and so on. I'd love to do kind of like a biz dev sidebar. I'll give you, our experience. I'd love to hear yours with your clients. I think what we tend to see is that within boutique agencies, owners are running new business for a long time. I think sometimes longer than they're planning to. And then there could be ups, there could be downs. And then there's this tendency to want to get sales off of one's plate. And we sometimes often see it as like hiring a driver before you have a car, right? So then it's like the system isn't there to support them. And then the salesperson is not successful. And then there's like a finger pointing match. What are you seeing, and how can agencies figure out biz dev sooner and better?
Yeah. Marketing is only getting harder right now. And right, the market's doing various things, but I think there's also the oversaturation of the market is making that more difficult. But I kind of realized like building an audience now is way harder than building like a product, a service line, anything like that. And so I think in order to create that biz dev, everyone should be focusing on how do I build an audience continuously. We need the demand side in order to keep the lights on, but we also need the brand side so that everything becomes more efficient later. But with my clients, we're seeing that a ton, like it's hard to get the leads in the door and stuff. So I realized I have what I call the snap offer system, where we're just creating a very specific offer with the goal of just solving a very small problem that leads someone into seeing our next, like the big problem that we actually solve. And I've started actually all of my client engagements now, we actually open with the snap offer because it's being so effective. If you can nail this, right? It's not just do a snap offer and you're going to win. But there's some details to go into there. But anyways, we get this done so that by the time we actually have their offer done and everything else, we were able to use that snap offer to fill their pipeline because we have something that people actually want. That's a super easy, like no-brainer offer to lead them into the core offer. And so we're seeing that as valuable. Most of them are founder-led, so doing founder-led sales. So.
Yeah, that's cool. Can you talk a little bit about what are the building blocks of a snap offer compared to any other offer?
So we want to, for our target market, we want to find something that is fast. So like they have to be able to consume this and move on very quickly. It needs to be familiar. So it has to be about a problem they've tried solving themselves before. Usually they failed. Otherwise they wouldn't be looking for a solution. And then it has to be fixable, right? We actually have to have some sort of solution that we can give them to solve this. When you figure those three things out, we then package it in one of two ways, either actively or passively. Passive offers are things like ebooks, guides, right? You build it once and now you have leverage. You can keep firing these out. You're good to go. The active offers are going to require man hours. Like we're actually in a meeting with them. We're actually doing something physical for them. And it doesn't matter which one, but the active offer is almost always seen as more valuable, right? Being on a call with someone, seeing them do the work, you feel that's more valuable than getting some ebook that's going to sit in your inbox and probably never get opened. And so that's like step one is figuring those details out. And for most, especially new agencies with no pipeline, no real branding, we're trying to do an active offer because it's going to move the needle faster and they have more time than money at this point. So it's like, spend the time, go create headlines for people, go create webpage audits, right? Do physical things where you send them a video walking through their assets, helping them with their stuff to show your expertise. Once we have that, we put it up on a landing page, a bunch of like, I've got a format and stuff, but it's a landing page, right? Do it your way. The thank you page though, this is where the magic happens. You put a video on it, right at top. Congratulations, like your assets on the way. And please watch this as the next step. In that video, you get 5 parts. First, you're congratulating them, right? Getting them excited about the asset they just got. You're doing a little bit of like credibility building for yourself to let them know or why they should listen to you. Then you're going through the asset, showing them, getting them more excited, showing them the things they need to pay attention to, that type of stuff. And then we have the most important part. You stretch the gap. In stretching the gap, you are showing that, hey, even though we're going to solve this one problem for you, there are still way more problems that you need to solve if you actually want this bigger business outcome. We actually help companies with that bigger business outcome. So if you want to chat, go ahead. Step 5 is grab time on the calendar below. And you can now run this snap offer even before you build this, right? Say you're going to do a passive offer and it's going to take some time to build. You can validate the offer by putting it up on that page on the on the landing page as a wait list. And make it clear, hey, this is not built. If I get enough people who sign up for this, I will build it. You're going to get it. They then still go to the thank you page that walks them through all of those 5 points. It says, hey, even if I create this for you and I give it to you, like you're still going to have these problems. So why don't you just book a call right now and we can chat about that problem. Doesn't impact whether you're going to get the asset or not, but maybe we can help you with something else in your business. I have had clients run this as a wait list. I've had clients run this with the actual asset being delivered, and people book on that second page as long as you can nail the stretching of the gap. If you can make it feel really painful and talk about the problem with such clarity they know you have the solution, then you can start getting calls booked. And now this is something you could probably use. You're probably doing something similar for outreach with like delivering value, but like you can give this snap offer to them and then let the thank you page do the work on the back end.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And kind of in my mind's eye, I have agencies, probably like a few of them that have had the service business, right? Maybe they're selling like a 5-6 figure service. Maybe it's video, websites, programmatic, whatever it is. And the idea of taking, this complex system and boiling it down to an offer probably feels intimidating. Maybe they're selling up market too. Maybe they're selling to enterprise or whatever, large company. What are some of the challenges that type of agency has with this, and how do you take that big thing and make it so small?
Yeah, so you don't necessarily, especially if you're moving up market, you don't necessarily need to create individual parts of the framework for everything. Obviously, frameworks are great. They're easy to remember. It gives you credibility, all these things. But you should at least be able to show a client the process that they're going to go through. Ideally 3 steps, because we don't want to go more than 3. People stop caring after that. But if you have it, and it's always some form of we're going to do some strategy. We're going to measure how that strategy is going, and then we're going to optimize the strategy. And 3 steps. You can name those whatever you want. You can coin whatever terms. But I think at a minimum, just doing that makes it a lot easier to kind of stomach, like, what are we doing? And then within each of those, like those 3 phases, you can break down those little individual assets. Everything, or like mini steps, I guess, sub steps. For each of those sub steps, those can all become a lead magnet as well, right? A lot of people don't get, and this is where I got to with the, going back in our conversation, I had a lot of agencies coming to me saying, hey, I need help with operations. I need to systemize everything. And then I would ask them, well, do you have this? Like, have you had clear offers that you got great results from? Do you have a team that understands everything they need to be doing? Usually they'd say no. And so I would take I could put out an offer, like a lead magnet, for them to systemize all of their operations, right? Figure out, how do we create all these SOPs, things like that. That becomes a lead magnet. On the thank you page, though, I show them my full process and explain those steps to come back. And so then they know my full process for figuring this out. They know that their solution is on the map, but I don't have to necessarily go into all of the details of like coining everything to put them in front of them.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that can be really helpful. It's straight to the point. It's funny because you were talking about how just getting attention is one of the hardest parts of the equation now. I think it was maybe a Substack I was reading that was like challenging the lean startup model, which was kind of all optimized around basically like bandwidth and saving time for development, and because development was the scarce resource. Like getting somebody that could code was the scarce resource. And now that's flipped. Coding is pretty cheap. It's getting cheaper with AI. And that's just in the software space. I think you could broad frame that to agency work and all sorts of creation and dev. And really the tough thing is attention. I think tied very closely to that is trust, at least from what I can see. Yeah. So I think maybe some people are listening. They're like, this all sounds really cool. Like there's all these ideas for lead magnets, for making these offers. How do I think about getting an audience? Like I'm overwhelmed. I could do podcasting. I've got my newsletter over here that I don't do enough, and I got a few hundred people on that. Like, where do I even begin when it comes to getting attention and audience building?
So, yeah, I got two models you can use. One I use in my business. It worked awesome. Which actually, let's just go right into that one first. Use someone else's audience. Leverage other people. Find the people who are serving.
Right now, Chris, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. When I left the agency that I was CEO at, I had to leave my entire list there. And so I was like, well, how do I get a list really fast so that I can actually start marketing to people? So I created the All-In Agency Summit. I ran the first one. I brought in 8 other agency experts that were all serving agencies. We're doing it in different ways. So I'm like, yeah, I can share an audience with these guys. And so we spent a whole day presenting different things, just completely free event, but then everybody shares the leads at the end of the day. So we all built up. So I grew. That was our smallest summit. And I think I still got about 200 people on my email list, which is, I'm like, all right, now I can start marketing to people. Like 200 potentially qualified leads, right? Way more qualified than if I was just trying to hunt them down myself. So that's one path. Find the people who you can build a relationship with, try to provide value, do the things, and then eventually an audience will start to build up. It's not always the fastest approach, which similarly leads to item 2. Everyone talks about so you got the funnel, right? Top of funnel, middle, bottom. Some people say it's dead. I don't know. It doesn't matter. What I like doing is looking at each phase of that and break it down by the actual action that we're trying to have occur. So first phase, top of funnel, it's discovery. We just want people to learn about us. The middle of the funnel is all about trust building. And then the end of the funnel is where we're trying to get a conversion. And so if we just reframe it like that, and we just think about those topics, okay, we can then go look at our audience and say, okay, where are they trying to discover new solutions to their problems? Not where do we want to be publishing content and doing this, but like, where are they going to learn about this? I attract almost no new viewers from my LinkedIn content. I go on other people's podcasts. Like here, I go on panels, I go elsewhere. People hear about me. Then they go to LinkedIn, which is my trust building. LinkedIn, podcasts, Substack, newsletter are like my trust building areas where now I got their attention and we can start building this up. And then conversion is all either DMs or usually your site, right? You got a couple pieces, but the piece that most people miss is like that discovery phase is not going to be the same as where you're building trust. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you can do both, but a lot of times it's like it's in different areas. Maybe you have to go on podcasts. Maybe you have to go to conventions, right? Maybe it's having a YouTube channel because they will scroll shorts looking for their problems. Like it's,
Yeah. No, that's a really good framework. And I like that a lot. And I think that there's where it gets interesting is like with LinkedIn, you can kind of have a little bit of both. Like you can be getting on a podcast, tagging people, interact, getting exposure that way. But yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think that what I've sort of seen is like there's probably channels that wouldn't work. Like if you're selling to, I don't know, Rust Belt manufacturers, they might not be on Instagram as much or something. But that aside, like once you get those out of the way, there really is kind of a choose your own adventure model. And different parts of your market are probably going to respond better or worse, just depending on them idiosyncratically. Like what we've seen with outbound is that there's people that respond to email better. There's people that respond to LinkedIn better. People that respond to phone, direct mail better, right? It just depends. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. Chris, this has been so much fun, man. And I think we could probably do a whole other half hour, however long this has been. To close things out, I have a couple questions. I guess my first is like, what are you excited about over the next 90 days?
Well, I'm revamping my entire business. Up till now, I've just been doing one-on-one coaching, and I kind of hit a breaking point for myself where it's like, oh, I can't take on any more clients. Now what? So I'm packaging the entire curriculum so that you can either do it by course, cohort, or one-on-one coaching, and kind of letting people choose their own adventure. So I'm very excited for that because I feel like I'll be able to get this out to more agencies, hopefully help them get their positioning straight.
Awesome. That sounds great. And where can people go to learn more about you and so on?
Dynamic Agency OS to see everything that I'm doing with the company. But LinkedIn is probably the best place to connect with me and join the conversation.
Cool. We'll get you linked up there. Chris, this has been so much fun, man. Really appreciate it. And let's do it again soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.